Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by shamanspiritcenter.com and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Today I wanted to talk to you about something that is really important to understand when dealing with narcissistic people, and that is the ego trap. Now, we always hear about narcissistic egos, and they certainly have their own ego trap, but we're actually going to talk about the ego of the other person in the relationship or the situation. Your ego is involved too, whether you realize that or not. Ego gets a bad rap. When people hear ego, they take it to mean selfish, self-centered, arrogant, egotistical. It's perceived as an insult. But in reality, everyone has an ego. It's part of how identity is structured. It's the part of you that says I. Pathologically narcissistic people have serious ego problems because they have serious identity problems. Your ego helps you function. It's the thing that says, I need such and such, or hey, what about me? Balanced ego functioning is considered healthy narcissism. It stands up when it should, and it accepts what it needs to. Many times in situations that involve narcissists, we find that the narcissist ego is not the only one involved. It's usually the biggest and the most toxic one, but not usually the only one. For example, when someone believes they can save the narcissist or love them back to health and fix their problems, that's ego. The ego is trying to validate itself through doing these things. Unfortunately, this is a trap, but the ego's unadmitted arrogance does not allow that to be recognized. It's a trap because it can't be done. The ego says to itself, no one else has done what I can do for this person. I can fix this problem. Or it says, when I can do this, I will have proven my worth. It tells itself stories about how things are going to be once this happens, ignoring reality in favor of what it wants. It ignores the fact that you cannot control others or make them do anything they don't really want to do. Indeed, the ego believes that it controls everything. A lot of times people believe that their motives are purely altruistic and they just want to help. And of course, that's part of it, but that's usually not all of it. Because somebody will not put up with that type of treatment just trying to help somebody else. There's more to it than that. The ego often gets involved in other ways as well. The ego believes it's the center of everything. To that end, it wants to believe that everything that happens to the self or around the self is because of the self. This is why people sometimes get offended when you tell them that abuse from narcissists is not personal. The ego can feel attacked and dismissed when you say things like that. This is also why people will attempt to control the narcissist's behavior with their own behavior. They will say to themselves, if I don't do this, then he won't do that. Or if I do this, then maybe she will do that. We call this if-then thinking. The ego convinces itself that it has more importance in situations than it really does. The truth is that the solutions proposed by if-then thinking don't work because the narcissist's behavior is not caused by what anyone else is doing or not doing. Nobody's is. People do what they do based on how they react to their own thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. That's why different people deal with the same situations differently. It's about how they feel about what's happening, not what's happening. In narcissistic relationships of any kind, many times the person's ego convinces them that they are causing or are in control of the narcissist's behavior, or that they can be. This is false. Reality proves it false because the narcissist's behavior is inconsistent and unpredictable. Even if you do everything quote-unquote right, it often makes no difference. They're still abusive and invalidating. However, the ego chooses to ignore this and instead chooses to focus on the times that it seems to be true. It has convinced itself that it can have what it wants if it figures out the, quote, right answer and ignores all proof to the contrary. It has convinced itself that it can win. Or it has convinced itself and you that you deserve what is happening and therefore are still the cause of it. The ego is emotional. It sees things in absolutes, in black and white. I won. I lost. I succeeded. I failed. I was right. I was wrong. This is bad. This is good. It doesn't like to admit defeat. It doesn't like to say, I failed or I was wrong. The fact that the thing might not even actually be a failure doesn't matter. The fact that what you were, quote, wrong about might actually be a good thing doesn't matter either. This is how the ego perceives things. Many people hang on to narcissistic relationships for years and years for this very reason. They don't want to fail. They can't accept the fact that they did not succeed or that they were wrong about something or somebody. These things and most other ego-related situations are usually wrapped up in self-worth. If people can succeed, they will have validated themselves. The problem is they're not actually validating themselves. They're trying to convince other people to do it for them. Accept me and prove I have worth. Love me and prove I'm valuable. This usually stems from an unhealthy or invalidating relationship with a childhood caretaker where the person was conditioned to believe that their worth was based on what others thought of them or what they can do for others. Many times these messages are given to children totally unintentionally, but as an adult, the person may still spend their life trying to prove this conditioning wrong while at the same time acting according to it. It can be very complicated and hurtful. For example, someone may not actively seek out relationships with abusive, unavailable, or invalidating people, but they may be unable to walk away from them because the pain caused by not being able to prove to this person that they are worthy of love and decent treatment is too much. It's a vicious cycle because every time they're not able to prove it, it inadvertently reinforces the conditioning, driving home the idea that they need to prove themselves to others in order to have value. At the same time, they're trying to prove that that isn't true, that they do have value aside from what they can do for somebody else. It's a mess, and it's a situation where people never get what they want because they're relying on the wrong person to give it to them. It's kind of like having a job where you're totally dependent on tips for your income. No matter how great you are at your job, no matter how far above and beyond you go for people, some people are just not going to leave a tip, and that's it. If you're dependent on that to live, you can get in big trouble with just one or two bad customers. In the same way, you cannot depend on others to validate your self-worth. It's too important to leave in the hands of other people. You must learn to do this for yourself. Otherwise, you are literally giving other people the responsibility to decide for you what you think of yourself. Validating yourself is about trusting yourself. It's about believing your experiences and knowing that you can trust yourself to show up for you the way you show up for others. It's knowing you can trust yourself not to betray yourself. One of the biggest reasons people don't trust others not to betray them is because they can't trust themselves in that way. When another adult breaks your trust, it hurts and it's disappointing, but it's only devastating if too much of our self-worth and identity is wrapped up in this other person. Trusting other people is only scary if you're relying on them to do for you what you should be doing for yourself. If you can trust yourself and are able to validate your own self-worth, it's painful when someone breaks your trust, but it's not the end of the world because you know that regardless, you're going to be all right. You don't need this person for those things. You can have healthy relationships where people are in your life because you genuinely want them to be, not because you're dependent on them for anything. Most importantly, when you can do these things for yourself, you realize that you're not responsible for doing them for other people. This helps you avoid toxic relationships where that is required. As you can see, the ego can cause huge problems for people if it is not tempered with logic and maturity. This is where pathologically narcissistic people have some of their biggest problems. Because of their dysfunction, they believe the stories their ego is telling itself. These things feel true, even when they make no sense. Narcissists have not matured beyond the belief that they're the only thing that really matters and everything happens because of them, and their emotions are so out of control that they're illogical. Narcissists are so desperate to hold on to who and what they are that they're unable to question any of the conclusions or narratives that they're creating. They simply accept these things and the accompanying feelings as facts, and they react accordingly. They have no checks and balances system in place to regulate these things. All thoughts are believed and accepted as facts. All emotions are believed and accepted as facts. All desires are interpreted as needs. All impulse behaviors and reactions are considered acceptable and necessary. Narcissism is a spectrum, so the level of ego dysfunction in any particular narcissistic person's life can vary, but if they are pathologically narcissistic, it's usually pretty significant. As we discussed earlier, the ego is the part of you that says I, and pathologically narcissistic people are famous for only thinking of themselves. A tragedy that affects the whole family will only be discussed as far as how they are going to suffer or be affected. Everyone is supposed to stop when they have a problem. Everything is supposed to stop when they have a problem. Everything is supposed to revolve around them and how they feel. Everyone will be reminded of what's important to them, what they want, what they need, and what they require, constantly. Because the narcissist's dysfunctional ego can never achieve fulfillment, it must be tended to endlessly. It's like feeding a non-stop screaming baby that grows enormous but never gets full. They are trapped in this way of being, and they don't even seem to understand that it's not the only way to live. Maybe for them it is. Avoiding the ego trap yourself with narcissists and just in general is very important because it creates situations where people are hanging on too long, putting up with too much, and where they are reinforcing their own old toxic conditioning by trying to use others to get their own needs met. Sadly, many people believe that this is love. It's not. You may, in fact, love the narcissist in your life. Many people do. But it is not love that causes people to betray themselves in order to hold on to something that is hurtful and unhealthy. I hope this clears a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions. So please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via email, via messenger, and through Skype. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org and click the Book an Appointment tab to do that. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by littleshaman.org and shamanspiritcenter.com. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you and have a wonderful day.